So if you own a Specialized bike equipped with the FutureShock suspension headset, like the Roubaix, the Roubaix, the Sirrus, or the Diverge like I have here, and you want to adjust your stem height using headset spacers, it is possible, but standard headset spacers won't fit as a FutureShock cartridge has a slightly larger diameter than a standard fork steer tube. In this video, I'll walk you through the entire process of adding or removing headset spacers to your FutureShock equipped Specialized bike, and where to get properly sized FutureShock specific spacers if you've lost yours, since again, standard headset spacers simply won't fit. If this is your first time here, thanks for dropping by. This channel features reviews, how-tos, and some pretty nerdy deep dives into the world of cycling, all filtered through this extra average cyclist with a technical background. If you like this type of content, then hitting the subscribe button is the best way to support the channel and to make sure you don't miss out on future videos like this. Okay, so in a previous video I made on Specialized FutureShock, I alluded to this idea that there are only two nominal stem heights you can choose from, and that any fine-tuning of your handlebar height would have to be done with the rise angle of your stem. However, as one viewer clarified, you can actually get more precise adjustments in stem height by way of using headset spacers above the lower duckbill cover and below the FutureShock rubber boot. This of course requires a removal of the FutureShock cartridge, which isn't too bad, and I'll walk you through the process here. Now the thing is, Specialized uses a proprietary spacer size, so a standard 1 1/8 headset spacer won't actually fit the FutureShock cartridge. If you notice here, the inner diameter of the standard 1 1/8 spacer is 28.7 millimeters, which is just large enough to fit around a standard fork steer tube, which has an outer diameter of 28.6 millimeters, or 1 1/8 inches, hence the naming convention. On the other hand, the outer diameter of the FutureShock cartridge is actually a touch larger than 30 millimeters, rather than the standard 28.6, so a standard spacer just doesn't fit. Now I happened to check my owner's manual, and it included a bag of assorted spare parts in which I found what looked like a totally standard headset spacer. However, upon closer inspection, I found that these spacers were included precisely for use with the FutureShock system, as these spacers have an inner diameter of 30.3 millimeters and fit the FutureShock cartridge like a glove. To me, it's crazy how similar these are to standard headset spacers, but you should know that they're definitely not cross-compatible. Thankfully for me, there were 3 5mm spacers included in my kit, but in this video, I'm going to be adding one spacer just to demonstrate the process. It should also be noted that Specialized recommends using a maximum of 15 millimeters worth of spacers for safety reasons. Now, if your FutureShock equipped bike didn't come with these special spacers, or you lost yours, or you just don't like the idea of using the plastic ones, then I've got some spacers here that I designed in CAD and had manufactured specifically for the FutureShock system from a 6061 T6 alloy in a black anodized finish, like most standard headset spacers out there. For all intents and purposes, these ones are identical to the proprietary Specialized spacers except for the alloy material. These are available in my online shop, which you can find in the description below, and as far as I know, it's currently the only place to get alloy headset spacers for the FutureShock system. Now you might be able to special order the plastic spacers from Specialized through your local bike shop, but I'm not exactly sure if they're available to consumers or how long that process would take. And if it matters, for your peace of mind, I am a licensed professional engineer, and I use these custom alloy spacers on my own bike with no issues. So if you own a FutureShock equipped Specialized bike, I highly recommend picking up a few of these spacers so you can more easily dial in the fit of your bike without having to spring for an entirely new stem or handlebars. And that concludes this shameless plug. Anyways, whether or not you have your own spacers or you purchase some through my shop, here's the process of actually adding or removing these FutureShock specific headset spacers to or from your FutureShock system. Now first, I generally recommend dropping your stand height if possible, such that the front wheel rests on the ground. You will be unloading the headset system, so if your front wheel is resting on the ground, it'll minimize the chances of the fork falling through the frame and dropping headset pieces on the floor. Now to remove the FutureShock cartridge, you don't actually have to remove the stem and handlebars, but it does make it much easier to work with, so I do prefer to get them out of the way first. Remember that this little top cap is purely aesthetic and is only held on by this tiny threaded shaft, so be careful not to break it when you unscrew it. And with the bars off and the plastic duckbill cover out of the way, you'll need to loosen this single pinch bolt using a 4mm Allen wrench. Now keep in mind, if you use the shorter duckbill spacer, it's all one piece, and you can access the pinch bolt through a hole in the side. Now once the pinch bolt is loosened, you'll be able to slide the entire cartridge out of the fork. And if you have your front wheel resting on the ground, and you don't mess with the locking collar too much, there's a pretty good chance you won't need to mess around with the preload later when you go to reassemble everything. Now if your fork does end up sliding down a bit, or the system gets bumped around, you'll probably want to make sure your headset preload is properly set before you put it all back together. And if you need a refresher on how to do this, again, there's a pretty detailed outline in the previous video that I posted, which is linked down in the description. So now with the Future Shock cartridge removed, you can weigh your options and decide on what combination of duckbills and proprietary headset spacers you want to use. And just make sure that they all go between the rubber boot on the Future Shock and your duckbill of choice. Just to clarify, once you reinstall a Future Shock, you can't add or remove spacers to change the stem height without removing the whole thing again. So once you're satisfied with the amount of spacers you want to use, you can go ahead and slide the whole thing back into the fork, making sure to fully seat the cartridge and align one of the flat surfaces of the clamping area with the front of the bike. Also know that the plastic duckbills have alignment tabs that need to align up with the locking collar to fit properly. Once you have everything in place, torque the single 4mm pinch bolt on the clamp to 4 Nm before reinstalling the plastic cover if you use a tall duckbill. Now, if you use a shorter duckbill, then you can skip this step as it's all one piece. After that, reinstall your handlebars, making sure they're perfectly straight, and torque down on the stem pinch bolts to the proper spec. In my case, and most likely yours, it's 5 Nm, but definitely check the specs on your components first. Put the finishing touches on by screwing on the blank top cap and stand back to admire your handiwork. Okay, so that's the process of fine-tuning your stem height using Future Shock specific headset spacers on your Future Shock equipped bike. Now, I personally think the engineers at Specialized could have incorporated the use of standard headset spacers, but they may have had a legitimate reason for not doing it. Now, either way, I do appreciate that they included some properly sized headset spacers in my owner's manual. Now again, you can always head over to my online shop and pick up a few extras if your bike didn't come with any, or you can replace the cheap plastic ones from Specialized with these nice alloy ones that I had manufactured. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one. If you have questions, feel free to get involved in the comments down below. And if you get a chance, definitely check out these other videos on the Specialized Future Shock for some additional information. I really hope this video was helpful, especially if you own a Future Shock equipped bike and you want to dial in the stem height. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.